So again, good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie Waller, and I'm the Program Director for Grantmakers for Education. I am only about 6 months into my role at EdFunders, so when Nicole initially asked me to offer some remarks for today, my reaction was, "Are you sure?" But nevertheless, I'm excited to be able to speak with you all this morning. And like me, there may be some folks in the room who are attending their first ever EdFunders conference. And I hope, yeah, shout out to you. So I wonder if then, like me, you came into this space excited and ready to engage, maybe a little bit nervous or unsure about what to expect, but also just ready to connect with folks, learn, and grapple with issues together. So regardless of whether this is your first, 11th, or 27th EdFunders conference, I hope that you're also coming away from the space like I am, feeling empowered, feeling ready to follow up with folks that you met this week, and also just inspired to take bold and sustained action to ensure equity in education for all. This week, we've explored what it means to pursue justice by creating context to thrive. As I reflect on the past few days, the voices and perspectives of the young people we heard from are really top of mind for me in solidifying what that concept looks like in practice. So I'd like to bring their words into our space together. During our pre-conference day at Morehouse, a student named Marvion reminded us about how critical the mindset shift from surviving to thriving was. And he also highlighted that thriving for him was directly tied to his concept of community, or Ubuntu, I am because we are. During Tuesday's plenary, Elijah and Elias Goss challenged our understanding of thriving by daring us to never stop asking the question, what if? Ebenezer Hale reminded us that young people thrive when we focus on their full humanity and not simply their obedience or their productivity, and when we ensure that efforts to center their voices are not superficial or tokenizing. And during yesterday's plenary, Rachel McBride highlighted that young people are better equipped to thrive when adults are intentional about building authentic relationships with them and then leverage their network to open up doors for social capital, which really then gives young people both the literacy and the agency to navigate the world around them and make meaning of it, as quickly evolving as that world is. Throughout the week, in learning sessions of all types, we connected with colleagues through storytelling and deep vulnerability. We also were challenged to think about the role of philanthropy in the pursuit of justice. And we know that this work requires us to interrogate ourselves as individuals, our organizations, and the field as a whole. As we wrap up the conference today and go back to doing the work that we all do, I hope that you will hold in your minds and your hearts the words of Marvion, Elijah, Elias, Ebenezer, and Rachel, and all of the young people that we are in direct and indirect community with and who we aim to serve. One benefit of building authentic community is intentional engagement in intergenerational dialogue. This allows us to remind us of where we've been as a way to contextualize where we are and really create the conditions for us to envision where we want to be. So with that frame in mind and carrying young people's words with us, I can't think of a better way to close the conference than to engage in that very exercise of looking back to look forward as we dig into the topic for today's plenary, educational systems change as a path towards racial justice. We have a dynamic set of speakers lined up, including systems thinkers and change makers, as well as a civil rights icon who is the true embodiment of the term living legend. We are also honored to have the trailblazing LaShawn Route Chapman here to facilitate our conversation today. LaShawn is the founding executive director of the National Equity Project, a leadership and systems change organization committed to increasing the capacity of people to achieve thriving, self-determining, educated, and just communities. Under LaShawn's leadership, the National Equity Project has catalyzed a movement to revitalize our country's approach to racial equity in education. In addition to her many professional accolades, including as a Pahara Fellow and author, LaShawn is a former teacher and former school leader, as well as a wife and mother to 3 sons. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming today's plenary moderator to the stage, LaShawn Routey Chapman.
Slowly, ready or not, here I come. You can't hide. Gonna find.
Hey, what's up now? Hey, good morning. Good morning, good morning. I can't really see y'all, but it's good to see y'all this morning. I am glad to be here. A recent headline in the Chronicle of Philanthropy read, "It is open season on civil rights. Philanthropy must not retreat." This clarion call was issued by none other than Stacey Abrams and Julian Castro, who were issuing this call to progressive and mainstream donors to, in this time, do more than hold the line. This is not a drill at Funder Community. This is an extraordinary time for us to actually be leading and catalyzing educational equity and justice in our work. And as we sit here in Atlanta, the cradle of the American Civil Rights Movement, we understand that there is legislation on book banning, bans on what is being known as divisive instruction and curriculum for our children, bans on affinity-based supports and anachronisms. So this clarion call got issued because Abrams and Castro, like many of you in many conversations that you may have been having in between sessions, understands that the most recent SCOTUS judgment on affirmative action potentially opens floodgates, and we're already seeing some of that for far-reaching attacks on organizations working to systematically advance diversity, equity, and inclusion, including our school systems. So what is philanthropy? Philanthropy's role. What are we being called? What are you being called to do, to be, and to have in this moment? As education funders, how might your investments really contribute to the remaking of the kind of loving, equitable, and just systems that we're longing for? So Stephanie gave you who was going to be on this panel. We're going to have kind of 3 different conversations today. But I want you all, as you're sitting out there, to hold is that this session is not just about these panelists or the work that's been done by them. This session is actually about all of us. It's about confronting the brutal fact that designing and leading positive, equitable systems change is messy, nonlinear, and not entirely in our control. That change takes longer than we think and requires more resources than we provided. It's about admitting this work is really freaking hard. And it is, even with all the talk of technology, that this work is a profoundly human endeavor. There is no instrument that's going to come and actually do this for us. No technology that is going to help us create greater justice and more equity in our work. So to help us have this conversation about what we've been talking about is systems change. How can systems change help us advance social justice? We thought we would just support you with a little bit of a definition around systems change, just for today. We don't have to agree on it or anything like that, but we're gonna ask that you just hold that what we are thinking about is systems change as the emergence of new patterns of an organization. Talking about structure and focus, and that this idea of system change actually has some leverage points. Where are you trying to change the system? Grantmakers for Education submitted a report very recently and said that almost 2/3 of you say that you are actually investing in systems change. When asked more explicitly, what are you investing in? What they found was a lot of individual interventions and programs. Donella Meadows helps us think about systems change as changes in structure, changes in flow, changes in rules. How are we investing in rules being changed? Changes in the goal. There are many sessions over the last couple of days that were kind of starting to hint at the purpose. What is the purpose of education? And how can we be redesigning and reorganizing ourselves around a new purpose, one that is actually going to meet the needs of our future? And then finally, probably the hardest but most high leverage of all, changes in paradigm. How can what we do together and organizationally lead to fundamental changes in how we think about the work, the ambition, the goals of the system, how we think about what's happening all around us? So we're going to get into it, right? Because we are actually dealing in living systems. And Donella Meadows says this future that we've been talking about can't be predicted, but it can be envisioned and brought lovingly into being. So we can listen to what systems tell us and discover how its properties and our values can work together to bring forth something much better than anything that we could have produced on our own. And that will be where we begin some of our conversation. What's been done in the past? The good news is there's some blueprint in our past. Right? We actually understand that we've done some really transformative work in the past, and to get us started with that, we are going to bring to get us started with a reminder about how real transformative system change is possible. We are going to bring forward none other than Dr. Bernard Lafayette. As Dr. Bernard comes to this stage, just going to give you a few reflection questions. As you sit and engage, we will have some moment for you to engage in some of what you heard. We want to ask you to think about think about 3 reflection questions. How might you need to change to truly be a catalyst for systems change? How might you need to change? How might I need to change? What's at stake if we maintain status quo as a philanthropic community right now? Where do we see opportunities, even amidst all the crisis, to collaborate, fund, protect, and sustain promising systems change work? If y'all are ready out there, if you're ready, say love. Y'all ready out there? You ready to hear from me? So I preempted the actual shouting and outrageous clapping that should be happening for this civil rights icon. So I'm going to allow you to do that one more time. Can you please welcome Dr. Lafayette?
Thank you.
Hello again, sir.
Oh, okay.
All right. All right, so you and I are just going to have a conversation, a little bit of a conversation about the extraordinary leadership and life you've had. And I'm going to ask you to kind of start from a little bit from your early time. So you were born and raised in Florida. So tell us a little bit, share a story, just a story about growing up there and how you feel like that impacted your leadership later on.
Well, I want to first of all say thank you for inviting me to be here with you. And it's extraordinary. I had no idea your organization existed. And what you're doing is phenomenal. I still can't wrap my mind around it. It makes me feel so good. I can just tell you that right now. Okay? But before I get started, I want to introduce my wife, who's with me here. Kate, yeah.
That
Kate
is
Lafayette.
Mrs. Kate Lafayette.
You are looking at history when you look at my wife. Guess what? Her father was Booker T. Washington's office boy. Can you imagine that? Yeah. And so he really made a tremendous contribution because he took some of the ideas and thoughts of Booker T. Washington and implemented them. In Tuskegee, they have streets named after his family members because he built houses and stuff. So not just rental houses, but homes for people. Yeah, and streets and things are named, for his family. I was very impressed, and I did get a chance to meet him and spend time with him. It was a short period of time because, he lived to be in his 90s, but I only met Kate, 50 years ago.
Just a little bit of time.
So I miss, yeah, right. So a lot of things that I've been able to reinforce and continue, that's why I've been able to continue doing what I'm doing, is because of Kate. But going back to the early days, I grew up in Tampa, Florida, Ybor City, and the streetcar ran right in front of our house, the cable car on 8th Avenue. And my grandmother and I used to hang out together. I used to go, and my mother said I was always on her dress tail. Well, it was true. I was a little boy, and I used to go everywhere she went. Yeah. And what we did, we used to have to get on the streetcar in the front door and put our money in, and then we had to get off the streetcar and walk along the side on the streets next to the tracks and enter the streetcar from the rear door. And then there was a section in that back of the streetcar, and it had a curtain there, rubberized curtain, and that was for, black only. They wouldn't let any whites sit back there. Yeah. When you think about discrimination, well, when they had the bus, I used to see little white boys used to try to run to the back of the bus because they wanted to play and they wanted to sit on those rear seats. That rear seat in the back of the bus was a big, long seat. You know that? Yeah. And I used to take my time and walk back there. You know what I mean? Yeah. And we were in college. We used to take our books and some coats and take us. That was a bed for us. So we slept on the bus. But back to the streetcar in the early days. So what the driver used to do was to let you put your money in the receptacle, and while you were walking to the back door on the streets, he closed the door and take off with your money. Wasn't 15 cents, but hey, that was a lot of money in those days. So what I used to do is go up there with my grandmother, make sure she was okay, get on the front, and then I would take off and run to the back and jump on the steps. So that meant that the driver couldn't close the door. Not with the steps down. I didn't weigh that much, but it didn't take much, weight to keep the seat. And you know what happened? My grandmother was running to try to catch up, and she was very sharp dressed, always had, pretty hats on and that kind of stuff, etc., and high heel shoes. And her high heel shoes got caught in the track, a crack around the tracks, and she fell. Boom! Oh my goodness. And I was on the steps of the back of the streetcar. So I jumped off and I tried to pull her up. And I couldn't do anything because I was a little skinny boy. And I didn't wear short pants. Well, my leg would be mistaken for a string or something, you know. So, but I tried to pull her up. And I remember saying something to myself that I never will forget. I said, when I get grown, I'm going to do something about this problem. So my commitment to change came at an early age. And I had that in my mind ever since I was a little boy. I didn't know what I was going to do, but when I got grown, and they used to treat me, in fact, they used to call me little man. I never did have childhood, come to think of it.
You were responsible for a lot of things and a lot of people. You did, in fact, make very good on that promise of doing something about the conditions that you were seeing. You left home at 18 to attend the American Baptist Theological Seminary in Nashville, Tennessee. How did you being there, how did you become introduced to nonviolent teaching and practice?
Well, my high school was Milton Senior High School in Tampa, Florida. I graduated in 1958. And our newspaper, school newspaper, won first place in the state of Florida. Okay? So, if you won first place in the state of Florida, you got a full-time 4-year scholarship at Florida A&M. So I got that scholarship. And my grandmother said, no, you're not going into journalism. You're going to be a preacher. So you got to find a place. And I said, Grandma, how you know I'm going to be? She said, I see the mark in your forehead. So I used to stay in the mirror looking for.
Where did you see that mark, huh?
All I could see is where I had the chicken pox. So I thought maybe that was the mark. If you got the chicken pox, you got to go preach. Okay. Well, do you know my grandmother went and found a theological seminary I could go to on an undergraduate level in Nashville? So I ended up getting this scholarship. It was a work scholarship. But I went to American Baptist College, and I made a mistake because, see, Florida A&M opened about 2 weeks before American Baptist College, and I got the time mixed up, and I went on up there to Nashville 2 weeks before school started. So I became janitor of the second floor and the librarian. And then I used to volunteer to wash dishes in the cafeteria because I love collard greens, and I could get the pot liquor.
What y'all know about pot liquor? They don't know nothing about pot liquor. She said, yes, we do.
I got some in my refrigerator right now. It was, but you started off with baby food. So you take cornbread and you dip it in the pot liquor, and that was better than, that baby food.
Yes, yes.
So that's what you get. Anyway, I'm in Nashville, and 2 weeks before school started. And so when John Lewis arrived, I had a big room. I had the best room on campus. So he decided he wanted to, be my roommate. So I said, okay, yeah, John Robert Lewis, yeah.
Yeah, that would
Troy,
be the late
Alabama.
Congressman John Lewis.
Yeah, Congressman, John Lewis. So we used to stay up talking about civil rights half the night because he was interested in it, very good, okay? And John Lewis was his class president. And then he became the student body president. So that leadership thing was something that John Lewis was very, very familiar with. And So anyway, we actually desegregated the bus, the Greyhound bus, the winter of 1960, not 61. Before the Freedom Ride started, John Lewis and I insisted on riding the bus in the front seats because we'd already desegregated the bus station when we had the sit-ins. The bus station had sit-ins, had lunch counters, so we desegregated that, and we desegregated the movie theaters in Nashville. All that was done, and basically, I'll stop so you can ask more questions.
Because he knows I'm not going to interrupt him. Y'all understand this is a cultural moment that's happening. We listening, right? But we are.
The thing that was unusual, and you might want to give some thought to this, we have what we call the Student Central Committee, and that was made up of leadership from the different colleges and universities that wanted to be involved in the sit-ins. And so Diane Nash, she was from Fisk University. Marion Barry from Tennessee State. And just go down the line. Jim Bevel, Paul Brooks, from the seminary. So when we got to our meetings, we realized that it was important for us to use the best training that we could get. Mm-hmm. So we got Jim Lawson to come, and he was able to teach us. And I got so excited because this nonviolence was very much in keeping with both my grandmother's goal for me to be a preacher, okay, and then my own commitment to civil rights. Because I was going to do something about this segregated bus, segregated streetcars. And I got so excited, I jumped right into it and started learning and doing that kind of thing. Now, what's very important to understand, we were successful in Nashville immediately, and it was because of the training we got. There's no exception to good training. The first thing you want to do in training is help people understand that there are different roles that you play. Everybody doesn't play the same role. And you got to appreciate.
Say that again for the people in the back. There's different roles, right? Training and preparation. Right?
Yes.
Yes.
You have to have different roles. And guess what my role was in the meeting? To say nothing. No, that was my assignment, to say nothing. So what I was doing was watching the other people give their opinions and give their insights and give their, some of them disagree with each other and some of them argue with each other, because whenever you get into a meeting, you're going to get some folks who like to argue, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So I didn't say one word. And guess what? The meeting did not end until I said so. Because I was watching the behavior, the eyes, how people fold their arms, and when people said things and how they reacted to them. You can't take no folks out on no direct action campaign and they're not feeling good about each other. That's high risk. You didn't want that. So I had to go back and say, what did you mean when you said that? I said this, that, and the other, whatever, et cetera. Oh, I thought you said this. So my point is that clarity is important. Yeah. Now, the next point I want to make very quickly is that you have to recognize that when you are trying to make decisions, who will be affected by those decisions? Who will benefit? Are you looking at a particular problem? Or are you looking at a holistic problem? Are you looking at a star? Or are you looking at a constellation? Are you talking about xenophyte or cosmopolite? So it's not enough to look at a particular problem in a situation. It's important to see how it's related. And what I want to emphasize here is what you're doing with young people. I was so impressed. But we got to continue to work with young people, because you're not young that long. Next thing you know, you'll be old and trying to figure out whether you took your medicine. So most of our life, if we live long, is going to be grown. Yeah, if you live long. So the point is, work with your family members first. Get them to start relating to each other in a sensible way, a humane way, a loving way, okay? And you have to work on helping them to do that. Well, I'm gonna stop at this point because I know you got other questions. But I am so impressed with this group. And you have no idea what you're doing and the impact that you're gonna make. And if you can work on helping people, and I'd like to see you to have a youth program once a week where you have young people having discussions among themselves so you can see what they're thinking. The other thing is, get you a theme song. You don't have a theme song? You need to have a theme song.
My husband said there's music to every movement, right? What's your
It
theme song,
ain't
Dr.
no-
Lafayette?
That's what movement is about.
Yeah.
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 We had seconds on the Freedom Ride when I was in jail in Parchman. They gave us seconds. I'm talking about food. Yeah, we had seconds. Because it was in the evening, and we won the doggone, what's it called, the guy, the warden? We won him over. Yeah, because the warden used to just slide down the side of the jail hallway to listen to us sing. Yeah, and guess what we had? We had ice cream every night. Yeah, those who were in jail and myself, they had ice cream. That's right, because that's what the warden did. He sent the trustee out to get some ice cream every night while he sitting there watching a black and white television. Man, he skipped that black and white television. You know how he got the ice cream? He put the ice cream in the mop bucket, put the mop on top, and rolled it right on down to our cell. There is no excuse. Music is the key, all right, to open the doors of the hearts of people. So the question is, what is your theme song?
Amen.
When we got arrested down in Jackson, Mississippi, what we told them is they better get ready because buses are a-coming, oh yes. Buses are a-coming, oh yes. Buses are a-coming, buses are a-coming, buses are a-coming, oh yes. The jailer said, shut up all that noise in here.
Dr. Lafayette, we've talked a lot over the last couple days about the role of young people. You yourself, Diane Nash, like this was a crew, right? I don't know who y'all got in y'all's crew, but this was a very serious crew of leaders committed to justice. You all were 18, 19, 20 years old. By the time you were 20, you all had already co-founded SNCC. A year later, you were on the Freedom Rides. Now, I have 3 young adult sons. They are 19, 23, and 25. And the only thing that I can liken this to, and it doesn't even come close, is my young men's response and activism in 2020, during the summer of 2020, at the death of George Floyd, which sparked a whole movement for Black lives. And me thinking about what it meant for them to be in the street and actually organizing and doing work in that time. And both the pride and the fear that I carried of them being involved. The first time you wanted to go to the Freedom Rides, your grandmother said no. You did that the next time, actually after some violence. Talk about your role in the Freedom Ride and what the Freedom Rides meant, the impact that the Freedom Rides had on the civil rights movement at that time. Well,
first of all, John Lewis and I went on the Freedom Rides before the Freedom Ride started. Mm-hmm. Freedom Ride started in '61. In 1960, the Christmas holiday, mm-hmm. John Lewis and I took a bus out of Nashville all the way down to Florida. He got off in Troy, Alabama, which was a service station. But we had desegregated the bus station in Nashville. Greyhound bus station? Yeah, we desegregated that. So how you gonna segregate a bus? And you're gonna, integrate the bus station. So we decided to go ahead and get on the bus. And the bus driver got so upset. John Lewis sat on the side next to the door, and I sat behind the bus driver. And when we got on that bus, he said, "Y'all get up and get back to that back of the bus." He said, "No." He said, "I'll be doggone." So he went in the bus station to get some help, like the manager or the whatever, police. Couldn't get no help because they desegregated the bus station. So he was very upset. In fact, he rammed his seat back and put a hole in my leather suitcase. If my leg had been there, it would have been a hole in my leg. So always carry your suitcase with you, protect you. So anyway, when John Lewis got off the bus in Troy area, it was a gas station and there was no lights, and his rider was supposed to be there. So when he said, I said, "Okay, so long, John. Okay, all right, see you." And I was concerned about him getting off that bus late at night by himself. Ooh, boy, midnight. And when I said goodbye, it was kind of one of those goodbyes. No sooner than the bus pulled off with that driver, I said, "Oh, Lord," I had to say goodbye to myself because I didn't know what he was going to do. But fortunately, he got himself straight. Now, we had to desegregate the bus station in Nashville. You know how we did it? Somebody said that they were, we sat in, and they turned out the lights and locked the doors and all kind of foolishness. And so we had an all-night sit-in. Then we found out, because we found out that they were sending the older Black women now who came to ride the bus. And they're carrying their little bags and things. You send them around the alley to eat in the kitchen on a porcelain table. And we said, "No, you're not going to treat no Black women like that." And no other women. So we had an all-night sit-in. And when I went to get somebody to pick us up the next morning, from the dormitory. The phone just rang and rang and rang. We were out in the parking lot. And these cab drivers came and kicked the door open and pulled me out and kicked me and knocked me down to the ground. You know what I did? I got up. Because now I realized his purpose was to run me away. No. When somebody try to run you away, stay. So I looked at him, and they jumped on me again and knocked me down and kicked me in the face, and I got up and I rubbed the shoe print off my face, and I looked at him. So they said, let's catch him, catch him. How they gonna catch me and I'm not running? So I stood there and looked at him, and I was a little skinny fellow, and they didn't know what else to do. So they just looked, and then the police came over and put me in jail, arrested me. So one of the young policemen was around with him. He said, well, what are we gonna charge him with? They said, well, charge him with, what you mean charge him with? Fighting. I said, well, if he's fighting us, who are we gonna say he was fighting with? Said, well, get one of those cab drivers. So they got the cab driver. So short of it is time running out. They came and got bond and put the bond up for me so I could, get out of jail. And guess what else? We put up the cab driver's bond. See, that's what nonviolence is all about. Okay? And he didn't get out of jail because he thought maybe we were trying to trick him. So the next morning he got out. Anyway, so the concept is that you think holistically, and even that cab driver and all those cab drivers who beat me up and everything, okay? And if you hear Obama's eulogy on John Lewis, he mentions the fact that Bernard Lafayette and John Lewis desegregated the bus out of Nashville. Okay?
Yes, indeed. I want to talk a little bit about roles before we go, because I know this audience is waiting to hear what you have to say about the role that philanthropy can play in continuing to move this work. So can you leave us with what you think? One, should we be surprised at this, at what's happening right now in our culture? All the fights that you all fought and won, we are seeing some retrenchment in that. People are kind of coming for that advancement. Are you surprised by that? What should we be doing? And then what is the role of philanthropy in actually supporting your efforts? What was it then? How did donors actually support the movement then? What should it be now?
Well, we had donors who did support us in many different ways, in large ways, and then also in smaller ways. Like when we had sit-ins and we didn't eat, if they didn't serve us, we didn't eat. So how did we get lunch? We had people who provided lunch for us, and we went back to the church, and that's how we ate lunch after our sit-ins. So we didn't miss any meals, except one time they started waiting too late to put us in jail, and we told them, no, we want to be arrested before lunch so we can have lunch in jail. Okay? So you have to look out for those things. So now, in terms of what you're doing, you represent a resource that's not just commonly used, okay? You have the the power that can help to bring about the change that we're talking about. When I talk about change, I'm not just talking about nickels and dimes, okay? I'm talking about real change. And that change has to do with providing resources for people so that they can be able to reach their goals, particularly if they have good goals. And that's one of the things that happened when we were in the movement, the American Friends Service Committee. When Martin Luther King tried to recruit me to go to SCLC, he wanted me to come on down to Atlanta. And I told Martin Luther King, I said, well, I can help any way I can, you know, et cetera. I said, but I haven't gotten a letter. What you want me to do, Dr. King? Dr. King said, Andy, to Andrew Young, did you send that letter to Lafayette? And so he called me Lafayette because there was Bernard Lee on his staff. So he called, Martin Luther King always called me by my last name, Lafayette. So I said, so Andy said, well, I was working on the letter, Dr. King, whatever. So Dr. King wanted me to come down there because he wanted me to be on his staff. So he said, look, why don't you come on down here and write your own letter? My letter of invitation to join the staff. It happened. That's a deep, dark secret, but you know it, okay? So if you can't get the person you're trying to recruit and they need something, tell them to provide it for themselves, okay? Because they're good at it. That's why you want them. Yeah.
We're almost out of time. And you've said some things that are really important for us to hold. If you are actually trying to change the system. Now, I imagine you all weren't walking around talking about systems change. What were you saying you were doing? What were you doing during the civil rights era?
The basic thing we were trying to change was the attitude that people had and the misinformation. That was the most important thing, the misinformation. So that's why when we had our meetings, we always tried to reach out to the white people. When we had our sit-ins in Nashville, we had white people joining our movement. We didn't just say this is all black movement or whatever, et cetera. No. And here's what I got to tell you real quick, because you might go, and people don't know about this. Once Lawyers' Home got bombed, our sit-ins group in Nashville, we were in meeting already, 6:30 in the morning. And we said, oh my goodness, they done bombed the Lawyers' Home. And he was on the city council, by the way. And so we had to organize a march, and we did that, et cetera. And we met with the mayor and all that kind of thing, et cetera. What I want to get to is that the mayor's committee, the mayor put together a committee of people, and some of them were executives, some of them were presidents of colleges and lawyers and all that. And they decided they'd come up with after that march, they would come up with a proposal to desegregate the whole lunch counters. Wow. That's what we needed. Leadership, okay, doing that. So they wanted us to come and meet with them. We showed up at the office there at the mayor, and they had a group there, the mayor's central committee, whatever you call it, and he wanted us to come and meet one by one. Wanted us to come in to meet one by one. So our group said, no, if they're a group, then we are a group. they could share with us what they came up with. So they were getting ready to leave, and I said, no, don't leave. This is maybe the one opportunity we have to hear what the mayor's committee got to say. Now, what we're going to do is go in as a group, okay? No, but if they don't want us to come in as a group, we'll go one by one into there, and they're going to share with us what they came up with, all right? Their proposal for desegregating the lunch counters. What's the big deal? I said, and then what we're going to do is say nothing in response to what they show us or tell us. We'll wait until we get back together. Okay? So if they want to meet with us one by one, these are old grown people. Like I say, you know, the mayor and lawyers and city council members, college presidents, and we're college students. So I said, and then we'll meet and then we'll respond to them. Guess what they came up with? Most people don't even know this. 30 seats. First 10 for whites, second 10 for integrated folk, last 10 for whites only, black only. So that takes care of integration. If you like sitting by yourself, then that whatever, et cetera, and you didn't want to be sitting next to no black folks, you know, and if you get stomach ache because you're sitting next to white folks eating, then, you know, you have your own separate place to eat. What's wrong with that? That's perfect. That's for everybody. And they had a strategy because if they kept seeing those integrated seats, then everybody would start just acting normal and just sitting wherever they found a seat. That was so logical. After we saw the proposal, we said no. No. See, it's a matter of principle. How are you going to have segregated white seats and you saying that you have integrated counter? Even though you have black folks there, okay? That's not integrated if they can only sit in 10 seats. That's segregation again, okay? And the white folks, they come to eat and they can only sit in 10 seats. That's not fair to white folks. Yeah. I mean, the children got to listen to, watch all this. You get my point? So we rejected it. And that's how we got our counters integrated.
We are out of time, Dr. Lafayette, but I want to say thank you for your work. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. We're out of time right now, but I do want to say thank you for your work and your service and for advancing the freedoms that you advanced for all of us. Coretta Scott talks about struggle being a never-ending process. The freedom is never really won. It is earned in each generation. So we want to say thank you to the work, to the sacrifice, to the commitment, to the conviction, to the aspiration that you were holding in your generation. We know we still actually have work to advance our freedoms in this one. Thank you so much.
I'm so proud of you.
Got it? Thank you. You got it? We're going to go ahead and bring to the stage Superintendent Mike Masuda, who is going to deliver a fire starter for us. Where's Mike? Where are you? Okay. Mike, I'm going to let you come on up. How y'all doing out there? As Mike comes up, turn to your neighbor really quickly and just say, just share, what did you hear that moved you? Can you all advance that side? What did you hear? Just share, turn to your neighbor and share with your neighbor, what did you hear that moved you? And we're gonna bring Mike right on up after that. You get 2 minutes. What moved you? Come on, Mike. We are going to hear from Mike Masuda. Mike is a nationally recognized 21st century educational leader known for innovation, entrepreneurship, and building creative collaboratives with private, public, and nonprofit sectors, which have expanded and transformed educational opportunities for students. In just 3 years as superintendent in the Anaheim Union High School District, which is in Southern California, he was honored as one of the 12 national leaders to learn from award from Education Week magazine and the Visionary Education Leadership Award from the California State University of Fullerton and the California Association for Bilingual Education. In 2017, he was the Administrator of the Year Award. Please put your hands together for a nearly decade-long, which is almost unprecedented in these times, Superintendent Michael Masuda.
Thank you so much, GFE. It's really an honor to be here. I think all of us are going to go home and look for that mark on our heads, because I think for sure Dr. Lafayette's grandmother knew that he was chosen. He was chosen to do something very special. On December 7th, 1941, my mother was a student at Anaheim High School, a citizen of this country. But unfortunately, she, along with 110,000 mostly Japanese Americans, were sent to what was euphemistically called internment camps. And because of the work of the Voter Education Project, the Freedom Riders, her son, me, became the first person of color to lead a large urban district in Orange County, California, the Anaheim Union High School District. So in 2016, the 75th anniversary of Executive Order 9066, which sent the 110,000 Japanese into these internment camps, they had a special recognition, and I took 2 busloads of students up to Manzanar to see some of the barracks were still intact, and they had docents, and they led us through the barracks. And behind me were 2 Latino boys who said, "Wow, this is pretty nice." And I turned around and I said, "Excuse me." And they said, "Mr. Matsuda, at least they had a place to sleep." Because as many people know and hear, there are a lot of kids in our country who go to sleep in motels or sleep on the streets or sleep in garage floors. And I realized that we had nearly 10%, about 2,700 students in such conditions. And I lamented with our leaders, how far has this country come? And in fact, I had a student that I rode the bus every day. This young lady, Abby, she rode the bus 2 hours to school and 2 hours back from a church that she slept at in a different city. And I vowed to support and serve all students, including our most marginalized, our homeless. And at the same time, though, a lot of convergence. Anaheim in 2012 had 7 police shootings resulting in killings of young Latino youth, allegedly gang members, but none were armed. That was the most in the United States. So there was a lot of turmoil in the city of the happiest place on earth. But all of us who really believed in the words of social justice, it always has come down to access to meaningful and purposeful jobs. That's really what the struggle was about and still is about. We developed strong core values, and I want to just highlight a few of these. Number 2, it says education must work for students and not the other way around. I think what we've done is many of us have created systems or prolonged systems where education is something done to students. Number 3, our district believes an asset-based instructional approach focused on our community strengths in nurturing everyone's potential. And I think number 7 is very important too in this day and age, that our district believes that public schools should enhance and strengthen democracy through cultivation of student voice. We lead California in the Seal of Civic Engagement. Nearly half of our 4,500 students graduate with that seal, and that means that they are committed to civic engagement. They've identified issues of concern, and they're willing and done something about it. Minimally, they've registered to vote. We don't tell them how to vote, but we know this generation. We know that if we empower them with those tools and with the knowledge of behind what's going on in this country, they will vote the right way, the chosen way. We built an Anaheim collaborative comprised of all of our stakeholders, higher ed and community college, as well as Cal State and UC Irvine. And out of this grew a system. We call it the Career Preparedness Systems Framework. Orange County is, like many communities, very divided. There's deep red pockets, there's deep blue pockets. My district has 5 cities, and there are very deep pockets of red communities. But if we frame the change around careers, around jobs, it's hard to argue whether you're from the right or from the left. And if we focus those jobs on student agency and voice, we have 3 drivers. On the left is the 21st century skills. Simply put, we put them the 5 C's: critical thinking, collaboration, communication, creativity, and probably the most important is compassion. But if you give a second about communication, we have nearly every child from 7 to 12 do truncated TED Talks where they are affirmed, their identities are affirmed, their voice is affirmed, their passion, they discover their passion, and they learn to do something about that. On the right-hand side of the technical skills, we lead Orange County and really Southern California in career pathways, as well as dual credit with our community colleges. And the third one on top is the cultivation of youth, voice, and purpose. Our students are, as you guys know, this generation is just like they were in the 60s. There's a lot of energy, and there's a lot of, that we need to untap, and we need to free that energy. We have built another systems called Rejuvenating Education Through Community Schools. And if you look, if you imagine this circle on one learning platform, that means everybody has access to this data. Number 1 and number 2 are really about those convenings going across this country in gyms and libraries where we're capturing through AI tools the text of the voices. And through those same AI tools, the facilitator is able to look for patterns and look for responses, right? And number 3, this is really important, that our teachers in real time, because it's all on the same platform, have access to creating performance task assessments, lessons that address community problems. And we define community, not just your local, state, national, but international, because I think it's important that our community is defined broadly in order to solve issues like global warming or issues like war across the Middle East or in Western Europe. Our kids have got to be aware and connected to the larger community. And number 4, the red part, is the civic engagement, where we unleash students into our community to problem solve community issues. And they become part of the solution in real time. And that's why there's so much vibrancy and energy. And that is why our students are outperforming every single district in Orange County, both in GPA and persistence rates at the University of California. And I want to thank our partners from CZI as well as the Stewart Foundation for supporting this. We're looking deeply at these drivers and connecting it to correlation with performance. And I think that's the big takeaway here, is that I hope that you folks can really rethink and reimagine what education should be. And finally, it's baseball season, so think about a baseball card, that every child is deserving of playing in the major leagues. So we are digitizing the talent for our young children, that they come out with a permanent transcript capturing all of their talent. And that is really what this is all about, empowering the kids, just as Dr. Lafayette and the Freedom Riders did so many years ago, when he said, you're a child for a short time, and that's so very true. And we hold to collectively the answers here, right? But the answers are based on the types of questions that we come up with, the questions that challenge the status quo. And I want to leave with two things. I think it's important that you collectively come up with strategies that make sense for your communities, just as they did, just as your predecessors did with the voter education project. And I implore you to be courageous, just as Dr. Lafayette was courageous. Be courageous. And I think together we can transform education in this country. Let's shake it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. I think you're gonna rejoin us, and we're gonna ask our funder, your funder colleagues, to come on up to the stage. We are going to welcome to the stage Sophie Finelli, president of the Stewart Foundation. Yes, you can clap for Sophie. Paul Herdman. Oh, Laverne Svison from the Carnegie Foundation, and Paul Herdman from the Robel Family Foundation. Thank you. I think we're just going to get on into it, and first just ask you all what resonated for you as you both listened to Mike and to certainly the conversation with Dr. Lafayette.
Should I go? Okay. First, I'm kind of speechless, honestly. It's what an honor. What an honor to be in the room today. I wanted to hear another hour of Dr. Lafayette and get the wisdom. So I'm trying to compose myself because it was really powerful. So two things come to mind for me. First, as I was listening to Dr. Lafayette and to you, Mike, this quote from James Baldwin, which is that history is not the past, it's the present, and it is criminal to say otherwise. We heard on day one about truth decay. So, let's hold on to that, and maybe we'll come back to this point and the call to action. And then the second thing is, thank you, LaShawn, for sharing some of this frameworks around systems change. But we just got a masterclass on systems change this morning, so I had to take some notes because. And yesterday we had the 10 Commandments, and so I'm going to, for me, there's a masterclass on systems change that we just heard, and so this is the notes that I took, and so number one was know your role. Know your role. So I'm looking to my colleagues here and to all of you in the room. We sit in different institutions, in different contexts, but we have a role to play. So I know we'll come back to it. Number two, preparation and training. Preparation and training, invest in young people. I think for many of us, it means investing in community, in youth organizing. It's a skill. It requires, commitment over the long time. It requires resources. So preparation and training. Three, clarity of purpose. This is something that we've been wrestling with for the last few days, I think, about do we have common purpose? Can we rally behind a couple of big themes? LaShawn, thank you for bringing up the call to action that was shared by Stacey Abrams and Juan Castro. I think we need to read that and really take it to heart. 4 was when you make decisions, who benefits? So this is another big one, I think, for this sector. And also, how do we measure and who gets to say who benefits? 5 is, who's your crew? Sean, you asked that question. Who's your crew? You know, I look at you, you're my crew. My team internally at the foundation, you're my crew, right? We're in this together. Partners, how do we create a relationship of trust so people tell us the truth? Because that's what it means to be in your crew. One thing that I heard earlier this morning from Sarah Sneed here, who I hope is in my crew, you know, she reminded me, I might be a foundation in California. We do fund in California that 3% of resources of philanthropy go to the South. 3%. So I wanted to say that on stage, Sarah, because I'm not funding in the South, but I have a responsibility to hold that and to say that and to figure out how I'm going to work with you to change that. So I wanted to make that commitment right here. And the last one is, what is your theme song? And I don't want to leave that off because when we, you know, the foundation, one of the things we used to invest in was creativity and arts education. And folks often say, you know, it's something on the side. But young people, when we talk to young people, and especially youth organizers, they tell us that art and creativity and music are critical to the movement. So I wanted to end on this note, but thank you.
Yeah. One of you come on in. I'll just connect to the music. My husband always says every movement has a soundtrack. That's right. Every movement has a soundtrack, and it connects not just to music, but to imagination, which is, you know, part of what we know is like Adrienne Marie Brown talks about the spoils of colonization being imagination. We can't actually get to a place that we can't see, we can't dream, and we can't imagine. And so music is just an extension of that kind of creativity and imagination. What stood out for you all, Laverne and Paul? Jump on in here.
For me? Well, a few things kind of crossed over with some of your comments, Sophie. One was actually the quote you put up in the front from Donella Meadow about you cannot impose your will on systems. I think as funders sometimes, and I know for myself, came into some certain systems assuming that while we were actually, in theory, collaborating with a lot of folks, really not listening. And so that was one. The other one that kind of echoed your comment was knowing your role. What Dr. Lafayette said, his role was to say nothing, but it wasn't to do nothing, right? So he was listening, he was observing, he was sort of thinking about the deeper strategy. And oftentimes, when we think about our role, sometimes it isn't to be the person in the front of the stage. So those were two things I would just take away, and we can kind of get into further discussion, but it was really just to not impose our will, but and to know our role.
So I sort of picked up the theme of what if. And so I found myself sort of jotting these what if statements. What if we no longer had to talk about student voice, but just simply listened? What if we focused on the constellation and the holistic picture and found our role, our point of light in that constellation to understand our role? What if we went together as a group, even if we did so one by one? What if leadership is truly collaborative and collective? What if we envisioned a system that is uncompromisingly equitable? We said no to that integrated, white integrated black constellation at a lunch counter. And what if we didn't have to still change attitudes and address misinformation? What if we had the courage to really dream, envision, and put in place a soundtrack for the change we all want to see in this country for young people?
You know, one thing I would maybe just throw in that I think kind of builds on what you were just talking about is leadership. You know, Dr. Lafayette showed leadership in a specific way, and Mike, you've shown leadership in a very servant leadership sort of style, and I think part of our role also, in thinking about our role, is to empower that leadership. And I think just providing the lunches for
That's
those
right.
sit-ins
That's right.
was the appropriate role.
Small and large,
Right.
right?
To provide the catalytic resources that you could use to drive that larger systemic change. So the notion of leadership and how we can empower that was something that sort of struck me.
Paul, it's really inside-outside process. You guys, by definition, are outside, I'm on the inside. And I think to leverage the resources for change internally. So I think it's very seductive to have, to come to someone like me and say, okay, we've got this program, we want to fund it, but it ends up or devolving to sort of a after school or extracurricular sort of attempt or project. And after the money goes out, oftentimes there's no change internally, because ultimately it's got to change the behavior of the teachers. And I think that's something to consider in terms of leveraging your resources on people like me, and so it becomes truly collaborative inside and outside.
Yeah, one of the things we were talking about last night is the notion that, are we really outside the system, right? You know, this notion of this is a human-centered endeavor,
Right,
and we
we're
all
all part
play.
of that ecosystem.
Yeah, we all play a role. And to your point about he listened, but that didn't mean he didn't act, right? Dr. Lafayette, and I think one of the things we talk about is, can we afford, isn't it riskier for us to not act? Inaction in response to a clarion call may be a bigger risk than any action that we actually try to take.
Absolutely, and I think we also talked about over the last 3 days about the actions that we do as co-conspirators, right, with our partners out in the field, and then there's the action we need to take internally.
That's right.
And we're all in different places, but we all can do something different, radically different, hopefully, as we get back to our own institutions, have different conversations. So I think action is both inward and it's in relationship with others.
One of the things that I think struck me was how, okay, I'll switch that to say, you all have been called in as a foundation community to actually not just hold the line, but to double down on the things that you say you most want to achieve in this work. And so, and you've named some really important design principles over it. I feel like those are kind of design principles. We didn't go with commandments, we went with design principles. But as you leave this stage, because our time is up, just what are you feeling committed to do now? Like you. You don't have to speak for your organization right now.
I mean, collective action. And, we're on the board of this institution, and I think we're about to turn 30. And I think this is a big conversation we need to have as end funders. So I would say about what our role is and what is collective action. And then, I'm going to go back to what Dr. Pastor said on Monday, bridges and lines. So I'm going to reflect on which lines am I no longer going to cross, and which bridges am I going to work on building?
Yeah, I would just say, and I say this a lot, and I try to remember this in my work and my team's work with all of our grantees, to design for the outcomes that you envision, design, and what needs to be true. What needs to be true for those things to happen? And sometimes what needs to be true is a lot of things aligning time, people, dollars, right fit for right moment, what the community needs. And other times it's really about this collective leadership and figuring out, we don't have all the answers, obviously. We really need to figure out how we do this one by one together thing that Dr. Lafayette was talking about, and sort of unapologetically respond and rise to this clarion call, because we can't afford really one day more not to.
I would say just an individual and then a collective response. So individually, constantly what I'm wrestling with is, so what's the art and science of the help, heat, and hope that needs to be in the system, and how I can play a role. Oftentimes, foundations are looked at for help, dollars. In this particular time, there's a certain amount of heat that you need to apply to actually change the system, the creative tension that we talk about. But there's also a pretty heavy dose of hope that needs to be infused into this system right now, because when you look across the complex world that we live in, hope is important. I did a traveling stint where I was traveling a bit around the world, and I actually talked to this young girl in Australia who is a Gen Z member, and I said, give me one word that describes your generation. And she said, lonely. And she felt disconnected, even in this multi-connected world. And I think, I have 3 kids around the same age as LaShawn's. And one of the things, I'm looking at Frank Gettridge here, who also works with a network of philanthropy. And I look at Nicole's new role in this universe we call Ed Funders. And we often work in our own little silos. And we were talking about, is there a collective call to action that we could do across jurisdictions? We don't know what that looks like, but given the seriousness of the moment, it feels like there may be that moment.
I think real quickly, I think that we have so many more resources than Dr. Lafayette and Dr. King had. And to Laverne's point, we are in the system. Just look around this room. So this is an inflection point, and let's make it happen.
All right, ladies.
All right,
We're
LaShawn,
gonna-
you're going to give us a theme song?
Give us a theme song. Find your theme song. That's right. Find your theme song. Absolutely. Thank you very much, you all.
So as they're walking off the stage, and you two, let's please thank Laverne, Sophie, Mike, Paul, and LaShawn for helping us think through these important questions. And really also, I really should start with Dr. Lafayette for reminding us of the power of young people to forge movements, sometimes to force change in the pursuit of human and civil rights, in peace and in freedom, with purpose and with clarity. As we close here today, an incredible set of 3 days, and thank y'all for hanging through, for sure. I'm reminded of a couple of things. Many of the questions and considerations that were offered to us, and I imagine that all of you have kind of swirling in your minds from LaShawn's conversation with Dr. Lafayette, but then also everything that you've heard over the past few days, all the conversations that you've had, the visits that you made, the new relationships that you have forged, I imagine too are also prompting you in your own set of considerations and questions. For me, I'm reminded of a particular caution that systemic problems, as we tend to call them, cannot be addressed through individual level interventions alone. That just as we think of systems change, that so too is racism a system, and that so too is justice a system. And so when we think about not just what our role is, your role is, but also that we recognize that there are many lanes, there are many levels, there are many dimensions for each of us to enter. This is not just the work of national foundations that do national big system work, right? This is all of our work, including Ed Funders. So you all left us with many questions that bear not repeating. I will also, though, not at this time anyway, but for us to take up, I also want to remind us, though, that as we think through these questions, it was Yusuf yesterday who invited us also to get out of our heads and get into action, whatever that means for us individually and in our organizations. You all and everyone who attended the conference who's not here this morning has been doing critical work this week. You've been learning, you've been visioning, storytelling, freedom dreaming, ideating, knowledge building, field building in all of that process, and connecting and cultivating relationships, and that is important work. But as we think to what's next, of course, I sit here thinking about, the what's next for Grantmakers for Education. And so we heard some questions and considerations around things that we need to grapple with as ed funders. Frank, you are also thrown out there and put on the spot. So Frank and I are thinking together too in these two organizations, in these two sets of networks. More to come, of course. Over the last few days, Ed Funders staff have also heard a great deal and will be processing what you've shared in sessions with us individually, in the Inquiry Hub, what you share in your conference evaluation, and all of that, to even think also about the nature of our work, the types of programming that we do, the partnerships and the research that we engage, and eventually how we plan even next year's conference and all the other things that are happening to help you all think about where your conviction is and how to march together, even if necessarily one by one. So much more, I think, as we move forward. Of course, one of our immediate next steps is to follow up with you, because we want to hear your theme songs, so you're not off the hook on that. But as we wrap up, I want to say a few thank yous, a short goodbye, and one share. So all of these folks have been thanked before, but I think it bears repeating. Please join me in thanking the staff of Ed Funders, the board of directors of Ed Funders, the sponsors, the planning committee members, and all of you, each and every one of you, for joining this week and for making this an incredible conference. So as Kent did, give yourself the pat on the back, right? Give yourself the round of applause. Personally, I really appreciate everyone's warm welcome. I appreciate the conversations we had in the hallways and in the after sessions, at receptions, and thankfully not in the restrooms, for making this an incredible conference for me too in this new role. I do want to thank, with all of you as well, the staff and the crew here at the Hilton. All the everythings would not be possible even with the best planned conference. And then also to the Balcom Group. So some of y'all know Marty and her team. They have actually outlived many of us on staff in their tenure with Grantmakers for Education. They're so integrated into our team around this time of year especially. So as you're walking out and walking through and see any one of them, please offer your thanks as well. And a short goodbye. Before next year's conference, we'll see you all in many ways and many spaces. Study tours, site visits, perhaps regional summits, and online. But I do want to announce that next year's conference we're heading Midwest, will be in Minneapolis. So yes, for the folks who are excited about that, in the fall, and we'll follow up with more details, of course, soon with the dates and when session proposals can start be accepted and all of the good things to come. And if by chance you're interested in being on the planning committee, see me, see Alka, see Kyle, any one of us that are here. So with that, I wish you all a safe and smooth travels as you go home. There are a bunch of box lunches for you all to take on your travels. And for those of you who scanned the QR code and requested one of Dr. Lafayette's books, as we have expected, there are more of you who would like to have his book than there are books. So if you don't get one here today, we do have your information recorded and we'll make sure to get you one once you get back home, okay? But thank you all for joining us for this incredible conference. Thank you all, and safe travels.